In around September of last year, I did a little ritual to find out what I should do with my Foolish Fish channel. I felt like I'd hit a wall. I felt like I'd really said everything of any interest that I had to say. And I know I could just rehash it all and go into more minute detail and stuff like this, but I wasn't excited by the idea, having just said everything that I had to say. And so I spent a little bit of time thinking to myself, what would be of value to people tuning in to my channel for the very first time? And I thought to myself, it could be a good idea to do a little ritual and find out what the universe suggests, right? And I admit that the answer surprised me. The answer was relationships. Well, what did I know about relationships? I had very few relationships before meeting my wife, and my relationship with my wife had an interesting origin story, which I decided to share. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm supposed to be doing stuff on relationships, then fine, let's start there. And so I recorded a video, which some of you may have seen. I've currently taken it down, but I might put it back up once this video is public, just for a little bit of background, right? So I recorded the video, it went out, people kind of appreciated it, and I thought to myself, well, what am I missing here? I'm supposed to be making content on relationships? I don't know, I don't get it. And the idea kind of just left, just disappeared, right? And I started focusing on other things. Well, little did I know that at around that time, my wife was having a little bit of a personal crisis. And by January, she had become so anxious that it was really becoming quite apparent that something was wrong. And I asked her one morning if everything was okay. I won't go into the details, but her answer was that she had been in the middle of writing a letter to me to explain to me that she was no longer in love with me, and this had been the case for quite some time. Now, that was just a little over 4 months ago, and the process of going from that point, which I'm sure you can imagine was difficult, very, very difficult for both of us, to the point where we are today, where we have established a very, very healthy communication. We are separated and we are not intending to get back together. But there is no resentment. There is no sense of hurt or any desire to hurt the other party from either side. We're in an incredibly good place, and it's a healthy place, and it's so much healthier than what we were living was, right? I'll go into more detail throughout the video, don't worry, but I just want to explain that this video is about some of the tools and methods and tips and tricks that I picked up along the way that some of you watching this video may find useful. Some of these are recommendations that I wish that I'd thought of a long time ago. Maybe if I had, my wife and I wouldn't be where we are today, or maybe we'd have been able to go through this process much sooner than 20 years down the line, right? 15 years of which were far from ideal. And I want to give you some resources, some book recommendations that helped me so much, and just generally give you some of the tools that I used to go from being very much not okay to being surprisingly okay today. All right, I've set myself up with a tripod. Let's see if this works. The first thing to talk about is what I did immediately. I booked myself a trip to Prague. Why did I book a trip to Prague? Because I'd wanted to go for a long time. It was a longish bus drive away, and so therefore not too expensive. I was able to book a very cheap hotel, and then kind of a nice hotel, and then another cheap hotel, just for 3 nights to get away so that I would be doing something nice, something for myself, while I processed this terrifying information. And so I found myself in Prague visiting beautiful places, the Alphonse Mucha Museum, these 2 posters behind me. I didn't buy them there and then, but I got them sent over from the Mucha Museum. Wonderful, wonderful place. And just visiting all these beautiful architectural gems. Fantastic 3 days, during which at the back of my mind was the information my wife, whom I've just spent 20 years trying to please, trying to make happy, and without clearly succeeding, has declared that she doesn't love me. How do I deal with that, right? So very, very frightening information. So that simple fact of being in a new place that I was excited about and that I didn't know. So I had to pay attention to every single moment, because I couldn't just turn the corner and know exactly where I was going to be. No, everywhere I went in this city was somewhere new. I don't know Prague at all. This was the first time I'd ever been. And so it drew my attention, right? I had to give my attention to this beautiful place. Now, I'm not suggesting you should go to Prague necessarily, but there may be somewhere close to your home that you have never been to, that you can access easily without having to buy plane tickets or, spend a huge amount of money, just to be in a new place that is going to draw your attention so that your mind isn't dwelling on these very dark thoughts day and night. Okay, tip number 2, those dark thoughts. You have to get them out. You have to get them out of your head and into the manifest world. Now, I was incredibly lucky to be surrounded by just the most amazing friends. And some of them were just, very far away, but they were checking in with me on a regular basis via text. Friends living nearby, checking in on me, making sure that I was okay. And their partners checking in on my wife, making sure she was okay. Not to forget, of course, my friend who has lent me his flat so that I've got a place to stay here until I find somewhere more permanent to live. Just an amazing amount of support. But what was most important for me out of all of this was that they were open to listen to what I was going through, and I was able to voice what was going on in my head every step of the way. And that meant that I was able to be honest with myself, accountable to myself, so that my thoughts, which could very well have spiraled into very negative places, and I'm serious, some of those days were hard, but having people there to whom I could make these thoughts manifest made sure that I was just a little bit more honest with how realistic these thoughts were. In other words, how close to reality these words, in fact, were, these thoughts were. Now, not everyone watching is going to have such a strong, supportive network of amazing friends, right? Some of you may be very lonely, in fact. And to you, I would say that a tip that I'm going to give you in a few moments is definitely going to help. But that tip that I'm going to give you in a moment it involves a little bit of money. And so those of you who have neither friends nor money, get yourself a notebook and a pen and journal. Every single day, make sure that you're writing down what your emotion of the day is and why you think you're feeling that emotion, where that emotion is coming from. Make sure that you write this down so that the stuff gets out of your head and into the manifest world where you can actually assess it and determine whether this is helpful, whether this is constructive, whether this is leading you to a place that you actually want to go, or on the contrary, whether this is not actually completely true and maybe an exaggeration, those kinds of things, which is kind of important if that exaggeration would turn into a very toxic thought that could fester and become something bad. So tip 2 is reach out to your friends, talk to your friends, make sure that they are there to support you. You'll find out who your real friends are at this point. And if you have no one on whom you can rely, then journal. Journal actively. All right, which leads me to my third point. The other option that you could consider for point number 2, but that you should do anyway, and that is get therapy. Oh my goodness. If you do nothing else, get therapy. Get a therapist to listen to you, to listen to your situation. We got a couples therapist in the end after a lot of conversation, determining whether it would be better to separate or to stay together. We decided that it would be worth reaching out to a therapist to ensure that we did get to the best possible outcome for our specific situation. We wanted to make sure that if we stayed together, it would be for the right reasons. And we also wanted to make sure that if we separated, that we were really going towards what was best for us. And we weren't in a place where we were able to work that out on our own. We needed someone to be there so that when we were having the conversations that we were having anyway, right? And that'll be point number 4, is to talk. But when we were having these conversations, it was just the 2 of us. And so we were only really accountable for the words we said to the extent that we had ever been accountable for the words we were saying to each other, right? So having a third party there really made us truly accountable for the accuracy of our words and ensure that our conversations were constructive. Now, you're going to want to make sure that any therapist that you reach out to is not the kind of therapist who gives advice. You do not want someone who has decided already what you should do and is leading you in a particular direction. And we found a really fantastic therapist. This is not sponsored in any way, but I found that BetterHelp was very well advertised. So I did a bit of research and actually found out that there was a new company called Our Ritual. And those of you who know my channel a little bit will know exactly why I chose Our Ritual. And it was just getting started, and I guess it's still a little bit fresh and some of the tech is not exactly where it needs to be. But they had an option where you can write down what emotion you're feeling on a day-to-day basis. It's very, very flawed, I have to say, but there is a way of making it work for yourself, right? And so you're journaling, right? You're journaling electronically. And this is a journal that your therapist gets to see. And you can choose to share your journal just with your therapist or with your therapist and your partner. And just having 40 minutes together every week, it was invaluable, absolutely invaluable. And that journaling process just helped that much more. All right, let's get in a little bit closer so that you can hear what I'm saying properly. My 4th point, as I was saying earlier on, is talk to each other. Talk to each other because at this point, you have nothing to lose, right? This is exactly what we experienced. Having conversations, really difficult conversations about how we were feeling and what we were experiencing, and caring about the other's feelings, despite very difficult information coming to the surface. Yeah, it doesn't matter how awful the situation may have been. At this point, there is nothing to lose by listening to each other and being attentive to each other's words. Honesty at this point is paramount because the alternative is separation in anger, and you definitely don't want that. Resentful separation is something that is deeply, deeply traumatic, and so much more deeply traumatic than anything that may have led up to the separation. I've got so many friends and family who've experienced this, people who have separated with resentment and who never got over this resentment. And that's a bad situation that lasts for years and years and years. You want to avoid that at any possible cost. So what we did is that we scheduled a time every day to get together, to talk about the difficult topics, right? To clarify the things that we weren't understanding from the other's perspective, and to express our emotions, to express how we were feeling, and to just be honest with each other, with the understanding that there was nothing to lose at this point. So yes, this actually started happening long before we started getting a therapist, and getting a therapist ensured that those conversations continued to be constructive. And they became even more constructive after a therapist got involved, asking useful questions, right? Questions that we hadn't really thought of asking ourselves. Yeah, so once again, a good therapist listens and asks questions. If your therapist is giving you advice, and if your therapist is, I don't know, prescribing pills, then look for a therapist who doesn't do those things first. And by the way, I do want to mention pills are sometimes the right thing, but we're talking about a couples therapist here, right? All right, point number 5 is educate yourself on relationships theory. And I started off by learning about attachment theory, and oh my goodness, how helpful that was for understanding what we were going through. Now, for those of you who don't know about attachment theory, it turns out that there are 3 main attachment styles. And there is a 4th attachment style, which is a combination of 2 of the others. The 3 attachment styles are a secure attachment style, which is characterized by somebody who feels like a relationship is a natural thing. They should feel good in a relationship. And if a relationship doesn't work for them, then it's not the end of the world. And we can either work through it or put an end to it. And it's not a problem, right? Then there are the 2 insecure attachment styles. And the first is the anxious attachment style, and the second is the avoidant attachment style. And these 2 very often attract each other for reasons I'll go into in a moment. But both of these insecure attachment styles stem from experiences from childhood with parents, right? So the kind of relationship that you had with your parents tends to then play out in all the relationships that you have thereafter. If you had a childhood where your parent wasn't present or didn't give you attention when you needed it, you see, it doesn't really need to be like a toxic parenting situation, just simply a situation where parents are very busy, that it could take nothing more than just that. Then the person develops the understanding that they have to work really hard to get the attention that they need, right? And so this very often turns into people getting into adolescence and starting off with, romantic relationships. And for example, they'll send a text message to somebody that they like, and they don't get a text message back immediately. And they suddenly feel, oh my goodness, I've written something wrong. There's this fear that settles in. And then a few moments later, they will receive the text, and it's relief. That's fine. This person loves me. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together. And then, these ups and downs. And then just a few days later, they might say something when they're in conversation, and then they'll go away and think to themselves, oh my goodness, what did my crush think when I said this thing, and they'll completely break down in anguish because they feel like they have to be something particular in order to be lovable. They have to act in specific ways, and they can just destroy their relationship just by saying the wrong thing or by acting in the wrong way or whatever. And so they end up masking a lot, right? They end up not being themselves and getting into relationships that are kind of a fantasy, not real in the sense that they're not presenting themselves as their authentic selves. And that's a very difficult way to live your life. On the other hand, you've got avoidants who also come from a place of a difficult relationship with their parents, where they just couldn't get what they needed from their parents. And their assumption was that, well, I just can't rely on my parents. I can only rely on myself. And so they approach relationships very much from the perspective of, if I get close to somebody, if I get intimate with somebody, it's going to be bad for me. I can only rely on myself. And so these people do want a relationship and they do get intimate with a partner, but then as soon as they do get intimate, they start feeling anxious and worried that something terrible is going to happen, and they pull away and very often leave. And so in short, these two attachment styles tend to attract each other because they trigger each other, right? Both of these attachment styles associate those panics and moments of deep elation, followed by more panics, followed by more ecstasy, and so on and so forth. They feel that that is love. And when that is missing from a relationship, and of course it is missing from a healthy relationship, then they feel like that's not love. Like, where is the excitement? Where are the ups and downs that I expect from a relationship? And so they get bored and the relationship breaks down. So it's useful to know about these attachment styles. And there are tests that you can take to determine which attachment style fits you. And you can then work on healing the part of yourself that is causing this insecure attachment style. First of all, accept that you have this attachment style and that this attachment style leads you into particular relationships, and then start healing that attachment style so that you can become secure. Which leads me to my next point, which is healing the inner child. Now, this is a term that gets thrown around quite a lot, and it's not necessarily very well understood by many people, but it's something that I've found to be of extreme value. So here's the thing about me. Because of the environment in which I grew up, I associated my value with my achievements, right? I'm only worthy of love. I'm only worthy of existing if I'm producing something useful, if I am helping people around me, if I am just behaving in certain ways, right? Now, understanding that every single person starts off with the same baseline, and that the only thing that differentiates us is our experiences, meaning that ultimately we all have the same value, even me and even you. This was something very difficult for me to come to terms with, and it took me a while to work with that idea and to understand why that idea wasn't natural for me. And so I want to recommend this book by John Bradshaw, Homecoming. John Bradshaw isn't alive anymore. I'm going to say he was one of the main figures talking about inner child healing. And this particular book, Homecoming, turns out this is the best book on the topic. But I also recommend just looking up YouTube videos. Heidi Priebe is a gold mine of information on all the parts of the self that you have to heal in order to be able to have a healthy relationship. And if you are in a difficult place because you're going through a breakup, then maybe reading through a book isn't exactly what you need right now. Maybe you're feeling more like you want YouTube videos, in which case, Heidi Priebe's videos are absolutely a must. Okay, there is another thing, folks, and it's the fact that I started exercising. And I think that looking after myself for a while looked like looking after my body. I had become more overweight than I was comfortable with. I think that's the key there, is how comfortable you are yourself with your body. And I wasn't comfortable with how heavy I'd become. I got to a point at Christmas where I wasn't really recording videos because I was feeling a deep sense of shame. And so actually on day one of having this conversation with my wife, I started to work out. Now, I started to work out, that's a very big word, right? I didn't actually start working out. What I did was that I started establishing a workout routine. And I realized quite a long time ago that the best way to establish a routine is to do that, to establish the routine before you start doing the thing itself. So instead of setting up a time every day to, start doing push-ups and sit-ups and all the rest, what I did is that I set up a specific time. I would just move, right? Okay, this is me doing some exercise. I just move my body a little bit, boom. Okay, that's been at least 3 seconds, but I've done it today. Okay, now tomorrow I do it again. And then the day after tomorrow, maybe I feel like I can do a bit more than just this. Maybe I can try see what it feels like to do one push-up. Well, no, that's not working. I'll do a push-up on my knees. Okay, can just about manage that. Okay, one push-up, that's it. That's my exercise for today. And then little by little, I started adding a little bit more, right? So the point is that at the beginning, I did the minimum of the thing possible to say that I had done it for the day, right? And so then after a week, couple of weeks of doing that minimum, it started to feel like it would be weird not to do it. Now, that's the point at which I started to push myself a little bit more, right? I started to do crunches, I started to do push-ups, and I very, very quickly went from just managing to do 3 push-ups and just really struggling on the third to getting up to 5 and then 7. And then before I knew it, I was doing 12 push-ups. I did 30 push-ups the other day, and I'm really proud of myself. That's in just a little bit over 4 months, right? And so that's a very cool thing that helped me. I started going to the gym, didn't enjoy it, stopped that immediately, and now I just do push-ups, I do sit-ups, and I do squats, and I've got a pair of dumbbells with which I do some biceps curls and just some triceps, and then I do some just lifts on the side for the shoulders, and that's it. That's what I do every day, right? And I just slowly increase the number of reps. So yeah, I'm literally exercising now, thanks to having started off with the bare minimum, right? That's why I am exercising now. It's thanks to starting with the bare minimum that I am exercising now. Thanks to not starting with exercising so hard, feeling so sore the next day and not really wanting to do it again, right? You definitely want to avoid that. And I fixed my diet. Now, on my way to Prague, I was in a bus for 7 hours and I downloaded a book by Alan Carr. Alan Carr is the guy who wrote Stop Smoking the Easy Way, which was the book that helped me to stop smoking 20 years ago. And as I was going through my Audible recommendations, I saw his name pop up, and the book was called Good Sugar, Bad Sugar. Now, I'm not 100% certain that it was written by Alan Carr himself, but it was certainly written for the Alan Carr Foundation. And I'm delighted to say that that book has done for my diet what Stop Smoking the Easy Way did for my 20-a-day smoking habit. And I have dropped 20 kilos, which is still not quite enough, but almost nearly enough. I've got another 3 kilos at the time of recording this, another 3 kilos that I want to drop to stop being in that overweight band and to stop being at the very, very top of the healthy or so-called healthy band. And so, I'm enjoying the process. I'm not depriving myself in any way. I'm enjoying the food that I eat. I eat as often as I like, and it's really nice, but I don't just eat any old thing. I'm careful about what I eat. And being careful with what I eat has come with no extra effort thanks to that book. So I really strongly recommend that Good Sugar, Bad Sugar by Alan Carr. I believe that if you want it as a hard book, like an actual physical book, you're going to pay through the nose for it. But the Audible book is available for one Audible credit. So I recommend going that way for sure. It's read by somebody with a very pleasant voice. Go ahead. Buy with confidence. And then I'm going to make quite a personal recommendation as we reach the end of this video. And I've talked about this individual's services in one of my news videos before, but I know that not everyone watches those news videos. So Raya Thorne, an Australian mystic, reached out to me incredibly kindly and asked me if I would like a free session with her. Now, Raya Thorne is a psychic, and she specializes in helping magic practitioners specifically get to the next stage. She does more or less what I do via book recommendations and tarot readings. She does with her own inner sight, right? So we all work with our own talents, and her talent is clearly with inner journeying. And the insight she gave me into my ongoing therapeutic process was invaluable. I'd been struggling in therapy to, really relate to the idea that my relationship to my parents may not have been as ideal and perfect as I had, with reason, I think, come to assume. And she pointed out to certain things that, while not exactly toxic, could reasonably lead to deep wounds. And Raya was able to point to those very, very specific points. And I'm incredibly grateful to her for having done that, because while I certainly don't resent my parents for that situation that I was experiencing, because it was a subjective experience, it was, from the perspective of a little 4-year-old boy, it was not because they intended to wound me, but nevertheless, people are people, and I think it's probably impossible for parents to not wound their children, unfortunately, as hard as we try. And I know my parents certainly tried. So hearing her actually talk about the exact situation that I had encountered and that I remembered at that point with so much pain was so helpful, because I was then able to pinpoint where many of my current behaviors have come from. And these are current behaviors that have led to my wife and I separating. And so if I want any relationship in the future to work out, I need to fix those deep inner wounds. And hopefully some of the tips throughout this video will help you to do that as well. There we go, folks. I know it's not what I normally talk about. It is nevertheless something that I finally feel qualified to talk about a little bit. Again, when I started this channel talking about esoteric and occult stuff, I was just learning. And right now I'm just learning about relationships. And so I'm sharing with you my personal kind of vulnerable experiences, giving you the tools that I feel I would not have survived without. Hopefully you'll find some value in those tools as well. I've actually spoken with my wife about potentially doing a collaboration where we can talk about our inner processes during that time, so that you can see the two different sides and get an idea of both sides of the story. And I think that it's actually incredibly cool that she's at least accepted to consider to do such a video. Naturally, I won't hold her to it if at some point she decides that it's a little bit too raw, which would be fair enough. Nevertheless, I do hope that happens. I want to acknowledge at this point all of the members of my channel who have been here for me, supporting the channel, supporting me financially as I really wasn't putting out a lot of great value. But throughout this whole time, I've felt your support. I've been able to afford therapy for us thanks to you. I've been able to afford to furnish a new flat thanks to you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to every single Patreon member and YouTube member, whose names you can hopefully see scrolling on your screen right now. I'm still reading the tarot for clients. I'm still giving you guys recommendations for books for your own spiritual path. I'm kind of surprised at how many of these conversations and consultations have turned out to be relationship consultations just over the past couple of months. I've been doing these consultations for a good couple of years now, and previously I would get maybe one question about relationships every 2 or 3 months. And now it's kind of at least every other conversation that I'm having, which is about relationships. Once again, I feel like this may be a sign that taking this channel into a more relationship-related direction could be useful for some of the community. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to hit the like button if you did indeed enjoy the video. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye-bye.